Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Students of S.H.I.E.L.D. Crisis Cast, where we're going and looking back through the DC multiverse, peering through the corners and going through and reading all of the current, past and current multiverse team ups. And we got a batch of Flash issues today. So I'm Mike, joined alongside by.
I'm Ginger Dan.
I'm regular Dan.
And I am Vincent.
You guys should have just done Earth 1 and Earth 2, really.
Oh,
You missed that.
Fuck. We missed that.
All right, we have to start over.
Yeah, we have to go back.
No, we're already go. Vince, what are we reading today?
Can I be from Earth G, where everyone's a ginger?
Yeah.
That'd be hilarious.
On that
the crisis, that'll be it.
We ever get Brandon on the show, you guys have to be from different Earths, though.
Yeah.
Well,
On that Earth, I bet Wally West is still the primary Flash. So today we will be reading Flash 129, 137, 151, 170, and 173. And these range from June 1962 all the way to September 1967. So, Mike, you want to kick us off with 129?
Yeah, the Flash number 129. We have an amazing cover of Jay Garrick and Barry Allen being beaten down by Captain Cold and the Trickster. So this is the first time we've seen Barry's villains. The last episode we had Jay's Golden Age Flash villains. So we kind of switched things up this time. And these are like my two favorite Flash villains next to Mirror Master. So I was really happy when I saw this cover. So the way this is going is we open up the issue as Captain Cold and the Trickster are trapping both Flashes in like ice, but then we'll flash forward to there's like this nuclear radiation of a meteorite raining down on Earth 2, which I should say at this point, Earth 1 and Earth 2 are not named yet. So how do we want to can we call them that, or do you want to stick with until it's named?
Let's just call them that. I think within the Flash they start calling them that in like the third issue we'll be reading in this episode. They actually start.
Sounds right.
Yeah, they should start calling that.
That's because the Justice League issues, which we'll get to in 2 episodes, happen kind of in between this episode. But let's just call them Earth 1 and Earth 2.
And obviously, for those not knowing what we're talking about, Earth 1 is your main DC universe in the Silver Age, when all the heroes you know now, like Barry Allen, Hal Jordan, that's when they come in. Earth 2 would be the Golden Age heroes. So, but yeah, like there's this nuclear radiation that's gonna like destroy Keystone City, and it's Jay Garrick has to go to Earth 2 and stop it from happening. But in doing that, he's talking to his wife Joan, and we get a cool little cameo appearance by the Justice Society of their last adventure. So it was cool to see them, though. We'll see them a little bit later in the show too. But so he has to journey to Earth 1 and get Barry's help to get like this. I'm thinking it's like not metal. It's like synthesized.
There's like a meteor that just absorbs these not actually real epsilon rays.
Yeah.
Something.
It's 1960s like B movie, like not science. But Barry Allen and Iris are getting ready to attend a costume party, and Barry's going as the Flash. And I will point out here, Barry does have his signature red bow tie now. But it's like $100,000 telephone donation, and Captain Cold and Mirror Master, they both meet up there, and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna steal this," and they're like, "Oh, I was gonna steal. Oh, I guess we'll just team up and split it evenly."
Well, they try to one up each other, like stealing it from each other, and then I think Flash shows up, and they're just like, "Oh, well, we helped each other out, so let's just split it. We're a good team."
Yeah. And so then our hijinks ensue as they run into Jay Garrick as he's trying to find Barry Allen, and Barry Allen like has to keep pulling himself away from Iris at the party to go help Jay Garrick fight these villains. So eventually they do thwart the bad guys. They are trapped in ice first, though, so they got to vibrate really hard to break out of it. And They do get their synthesized like metal stuff, and then Jay takes a shovel and makes a really, really big hole in the ground. And he uses multiple shovels because they could break really quickly. But everything's stopped by the meteorite, and they save the day. And Jay Garrick also sets up Earth One, so when that meteorite hits them, they'll be safe. It's kind of a weird, kooky story, but once again, another classic.
Let's not forget how Jay and Barry trapped Mirror Master and the Trickster.
Oh yeah. It's hilarious. They trap him in a cave, and somehow Jay Garrick's moving so fast that he has his hands on both of their guns. So Barry Allen snaps his fingers and makes them shoot each other.
And this is after they lured them out of hiding by saying that the meteorite Jay digged up was actually just diamonds.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense because like the script just says that Jay kind of pointed them towards each other. Like it doesn't say he pulled the triggers.
Yeah.
They just shot each other.
I mean, they did fire because they go, "You shot me."
Yeah.
Yeah, shouldn't he be dead or something?
Well, I mean, one shoots ice and the other shoots.
Yeah, they both
the trickster shoots.
Excuse me, Dan. This was approved by the Comics Code Authority. There's no death.
Exactly.
There's no death until Gwen Stacy, my dude.
Yep. I like how at the end with the radiation, like you said, when they use it to save Earth 2, and then Barry's like, "Wait, what about our Earth?" Like, and then Jay has to kind of backtrack and be like, "Oh yeah, we got that covered. Don't worry about it."
You know, Jay's just like, "Nah, it's good, man. I synthesized that shit.
Yeah,
I'm a scientist."
Yeah, and I'm like, "Oh, that's really wrapping up pretty nicely."
Well, wait, I did mention Gwen Stacy, so if you want to hear us talk about that, watch our other show, Saga, the Clone Saga.
That's a pretty good plug.
Yeah, shameless plug.
It's cool here because I mean this whole meteorite thing and then the eventual like Earth 1 is fixed 2 thing. It sets up that Jay, because he's significantly older than Barry, he's like a business owner and owns these like a chemicals company, which has a location in Keystone where he lives, but then also has location in Flagstaff, Arizona, which happens to be exactly where the meteorite is, I guess.
I thought like the president or like the general like called Jay Garrick specifically.
Yeah.
Like, hey, check this out.
And then the other thing is when he's at the meteorite, there's this moment where Jay Garrick, he's like talking to a bunch of other top scientists and military personnel, and he just explains the dual Earths theory to them.
I forgot about that. Figure it out.
And they're just like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that checks out. Go fuck around by meteorite.
And it's not, it's kind of crazy. And then the costume ball part was interesting because that Iris Allen dies at a costume ball. That's when Reverse Flash puts his hand in her neck or whatever. I don't remember exactly.
Puts his hand to her skull.
Yeah. But that was at a costume ball as well. But they're definitely not foreshadowing that intentionally at this point.
Wait, did we talk about yet how I hate to cut you off there, but backtracking to the whole thing when they get frozen in ice. Do you guys remember how they explained how they were able to create air? They both breathed in, like took a breath before they got frozen, and that gave them enough air to vibrate out of the ice. I'm like, that's a little crazy.
Well, I took it as them basically sucking their stomachs in.
Yeah.
So somehow the ice wasn't all the way up to their bodies.
That still doesn't make sense.
I don't know.
It's the Silver Age. I think they meant it to, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it does.
No, I thought that was a little funny. I'm like, wait.
So I will move us into Flash 137. And there are strange lights causing blackouts in several cities on Barry's Earth, including Washington, D.C., Gotham City, and Calvin City. And those last two, we should know as the home to Batman. And Calvin City may be the Atom, but that's not true. Because Calvin City totally does not exist on Barry Allen's Earth. Calvin City is where the Golden Age Atom is from, but the Silver Age Atom, just like how there's the split between Keystone versus Central City, Silver Age Adam lives in Ivytown. But Barry remembers that DC and Gotham City and Calvin City, which he shouldn't, whatever, are all home to characters from the Justice Society, which he read as a kid. And so he pulls out a copy of All-Star Comics 37, the first appearance of the Injustice Society. That's probably worth something if he still had it. And so then Barry's like, oh, let me just go to Earth 2. And I love how, like, getting from Earth 2, he just has to go to the community center every time.
Yeah, I love how he never goes anywhere else. Like in theory, he should be able to vibrate from any point on his Earth and get there. And
Well,
like, I'm sure there's something to be said, like, he knows for a fact if he does it from the community center, he ends up in a field where he like won't accidentally be like inside a building. Just seems so funny.
I don't know. It's not very clear because when Jay travels, he always goes to the point where Barry comes in.
Yeah, it makes any sense. If he's able to go in through any way, why can't Barry do the same thing?
No. Jay goes to the point where Barry arrives.
Like, they only ever use these 2 points, which,
yeah,
as we can guess, are connected to each other. But I don't see why that wouldn't mean, like, if Barry decided to vibrate into Earth 2 from Gotham, he wouldn't end up in Gotham on Earth 2.
Yeah.
I see no reason as to why that would be a thing.
There is a problem with this because the two character, well, I can't remember. Wonder Woman's sketchy, but like the two big main characters that didn't have their continuities like restarted, but when the Silver Age happened was Batman and Superman. So like, it's like this weird thing right now. Is where are Batman and Superman? Are they on Earth 1? Are they on Earth 2? Like,
yeah, they don't really explain it.
Yeah, it's not explained yet.
Yeah, we'll get to explanations later, and they're complicated. So he arrives on Earth 2, and he runs up to Jay's house, and we learn that JSA members are disappearing. And then they try and track it down, and they find like where these lights are being generated from. But then Jay gets trapped in a weird box. But Barry manages to break him out of the box.
After chasing this box like across the city.
And going up
like 3 pages.
Yeah, just like up and down buildings trying to get this flying box.
And then we learn that Vandal Savage is the man behind all this. And Vandal Savage first appeared in the Golden Age Green Lantern number 10. And he actually only had 2 appearances. He had that appearance and then the JSA issue, which we earlier referenced, and which Barry literally pulls out.
Wow.
And we get a recap of his origin. He's an immortal caveman who was exposed to a meteorite, so he's intelligent and immortal. And he ends up lassoing both Flashes while he's in his weird spaceship and then drags them along. And I thought that scene was just ridiculous. It's like one of them is flying. And he also uses like a gravity manipulator gun kind of thing to make one of them float like a balloon and one of them sink below the ground.
Yeah, poor Jay is like getting dragged literally through the earth.
Yeah.
Like, how?
The 2 of them vibrate at the same time, which causes his ship to crash. So then he runs away. Also, I love he uses all these weapons to manipulate them throughout the whole issue, but he mentions every time that they're not his weapons. They're all invented by his friends, his other friends in the Injustice Society. And so he uses a will manipulator, however that works, to make them fight each other. And Barry wins just because Jay's an old man.
Yeah.
And I like how like they're actually pulling it off pretty well, where like they never make Jay actually look like shitty or inferior to Barry. There are only just occasional points where it's like, yeah, he's 20 years older, obviously.
They almost go with the fact, like I think in the past issue they said Jay is still as fast as Barry Allen.
Yeah, he just can't run he just can't keep it up as long.
Yeah. So like the only real difference in terms of them right now is that Jay's 20 years older and has gray on the temples. So
Mm-hmm.
And so Savage traps Jay, and then he tries to trap Barry. He sets a trap for him, but Barry avoids it by knowing how pupils react to light.
I know this explanation sucked.
I thought it was hilarious.
Like, it makes sense, but it's just such a dumb thing.
And so then
What if Vandal Savage was just on a ton of drugs?
Probably has done all the drugs.
Yeah,
he's probably invented a few of them himself.
Well, we should say that Vandal Savage. It's interesting you said that this is only his his third appearance.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which is crazy because now you think of Vandal Savage as kind of like a bigger Justice League villain.
Yep, Justice League, and in like modern times, a lot of times with Superman. But I think his next few appearances are in Flash, even after this. But so then in the end, they free the JSA, and the JSA decides, hey, we should start having meetings again and hang out. So the JSA chronologically is officially reformed around 20 years or so after they retired.
And Dan, since this is like your first foray into the DC universe, what are your opinions on the Justice Society of America?
I actually had a question about one of them, with Wonder Woman especially. How are they going to explain her? Because isn't she the same?
It's Hippolyta.
Oh, okay. So
maybe. It's all fucked. That's the thing.
Yeah, I don't think we'll actually read those stories because they're not overall because that's post-multiverse kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But the eventual answer is that there are 2 Batmen, 2 Supermen, and 2 Wonder Womans.
Okay.
Also 2 Green Arrows and 2 Aquamans. I don't know if we'll see those that much.
When I read the original Crisis on Infinite Earth, I think they try to explain it in there that the Golden Age Wonder Woman is Hippolyta, but I don't know if that's stuck and since it's been changed over. But
yeah.
But Dan, who's your favorite character? Give us your top 3 that you'd be most interested in of the Justice Society.
Well, isn't Dr. Midnight in there? Dr.
Yes.
Midnight and Dr. Fate.
He's not. Dr. Fate's in there, but he's not in this issue.
Yeah, no, I think Dr. Midnight looks pretty cool. Who else is in there? I forget. I'm not really sure. Who else.
Alan Scott, Green Lantern, the Atom,
Spectre. You mentioned him yet?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm trying to focus on people that are in this issue. Johnny.
There were only 6.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the Atom,
including Jay, I think.
Yeah, Jay would be there, obviously, because we're talking about him. Hawkman.
So we'll probably get more explanation on some of their powers as we get to the Justice League issues. But Dan, because you mentioned Dr. Midnight, he's basically Daredevil. So he's blind, but he uses smoke bombs, and he can see in absolute darkness.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what his powers were because there's an issue that comes after this one. I think it's the last one or the second last one, 170, that has him and Dr. Fate teaming up with Flash. And I'm just I don't know. I wasn't really curious. I wasn't really familiar with what his powers were.
His powers is a medical degree.
Yeah,
that's the other
he's a doctor.
He serves as kind of the surgeon for the whole DC universe.
And if here's another shameless plug. If you want to find us talking about more about Dr. Midnight, he pops up very briefly in Batman Heart of Hush, which we did a review of for Cowcast. Batman recruits his help when Catwoman's heart is stolen out of her body by Hush.
The other cool thing about Dr. Midnight is his sidekick is an owl.
Oh my god.
Named Hootie.
Hootie?
And there's a scene, I think it's in...
Which connects to Hootie and the Blowfish, which also been appeared on the Saga, the Clone Saga.
God. Why does everything go back to that?
My superpower is the shameless plug, sir.
Oh my god.
I see.
I think it's in the Justice Society Returns arc, which is just before James Robinson and eventually Jeff Johns relaunched the JSA in 1999. But there's a scene where Hootie just flies through someone's body somehow. The owl,
I want to see that picture of an owl.
Just punctures someone's chest.
I like Our Man Dan, but he's not here in this issue.
I'll check
Our Man is basically he pops pills, which make him really strong for like an hour, but eventually he becomes addicted to them, and so he has to stop using them because it fucks up his blood and heart and everything.
His liver too.
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of like the early Giant Man comics where he had to take pills to grow big, and then just gas and all that shit. I don't remember what it was, but yeah.
All right, Dan, take us into Flash 151.
All right, so Flash 151. It's we get another issue where the Shade makes his appearance. I know in our first episode we talked about, Flash 123 with the team up with him and the Trickster and who's the third person? The Fiddler. Sorry. So we get a issue with the Shade who's creating these black blobs that are appearing out of nowhere, and the issue opens with Iris and Barry shopping for an engagement ring after being engaged for 2 years. Is that what they said? 2 years, was it? I think.
Yep.
So they're shopping for an engagement ring, and I guess the ring is like on the thing, and like Iris about to pick it up, and like this black blob appears, and she's like, "What's that?" And then like this whole thing just grows in the jewelry store, and they all run crazy and all this stuff, and we get I don't know how many pages of Flash run around trying to destroy these different black blob monster things. Like some of them are flying in the air, some of them are like on the ground. There was one point, and I don't know if this is a power of his, but he was like using his hands as windmills to move clouds around and like create lightning. Is that something that's normal for Flash to do, or am I just like?
I mean, sort of. I mean, this is the Silver Age, so his powers are a little more fluffy, and they can just bullshit them.
Yeah.
But hypothetically, I mean, if you could create enough wind, you could move a cloud. I think you could do that. I mean, it probably just slightly disperse.
Yeah.
But so he's able to move the cloud, and then the weirdest part is where he literally, like, puts together a lot of lightning. And then
he there's a shot of him, and he's just like grabbing lightning and stabbing it into this guy. Yeah. Like a page after he says, "You don't actually see lightning; it's invisible. You're just seeing burning air."
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a pretty awesome scene, though.
Oh yeah, no, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of like Storm from X-Men, how she's able to control the weather like that. But yeah, another thing too. I mean, this is kind of a side note. I always love when when the narrators are describing like the different things that they tell, like for different characters. And for Flash, it seemed like they give him like a lot of different monikers. Like I think there's when they talk about him in another episode, they say, hey, he's like the Sultan of Speed, and like in this one they call him the Monarch of Motion. I that's a little side note I thought I mentioned, but they mention a lot of different things like that. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was trying to think, like there was one like Wizard of Wiz or something like that.
Yeah, I thought that's really fun. I mean, it's cool to see how many different things they name him. Anyway, so basically he's trying to figure out like where these are coming from, and he goes back to Earth 2, and he's trying to find I guess Jay, and he knocks on the door of his house, and Joan Williams, his wife, Jay's wife, opens the door, and she's actually wearing the missing engagement ring because I guess the ring got lost.
No. So sorry, but so the Shade steals the ring, and Barry doesn't. I don't think Barry knows it's the Shade at this point.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So his thought is, well, that was a one of a kind ring. Earth 2 is the same as Earth 1. There's probably a ring there I could just go get.
Yeah.
So that's why he goes to Earth 2. Like, he's literally just like, I'll just put off this whole black blob thing so I can get my fiance an engagement ring.
And he goes back, he's like, oh, damn, it's on her ring. I just can't take it from her.
I thought he was going to take Joan's ring, and my hatred of Barry Allen was only going to exasperate more.
Yeah, that would not be a good move, but wouldn't be unexpected.
I was like really hoping, I'm like, oh, please don't tell me by the end of this Jay's going to be like, oh, you can have. I'm like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, so they kind of, I guess they kind of they do a little investigation of why stuff is disappearing from Earth 2, and what basically it comes down to is that S.H.I.E.L.D is actually sending these monsters to Earth 1 to steal items to bring back to Earth 2. So, you know,
he can then legally sell because he didn't steal the real ones on Earth 2.
Yeah,
and no one really knows that there's an Earth 1.
Yeah, and they were basically explaining to the little backstory about how he was able to get out of jail and how he was getting rich and all this shit, and they couldn't indict him for anything because there wasn't any evidence that he was stealing stuff from anything. I think there was one time where Jay shows up and like, I think he has like some sort of like lamp or something from a museum, and Jay's like, you know, you're stealing that or whatever, and then he actually takes him. S.H.I.E.L.D takes him back to the museum to show him that that wasn't stolen, and he's like, oh, okay, so, but yeah, so he basically finds out he's going through this dimension, the dark dimension, to steal these items. So what Flash does is he tries going back to, I guess, Earth 2 to fight these monsters again, and he realizes, he's like, wait, I've been doing this wrong the whole time, and what he does is he actually goes to the U.S. Mint and gets like this gold. He's like, oh, I'm gonna steal it, but I'm definitely gonna like bring it back at some point, which I don't know if he ever does in this issue. He just puts it on and doesn't, no explanation for it.
Pretends to be a statue.
Yeah, he coats himself in gold, which I don't know if that's a really healthy or safe thing to do. Gets stolen into this dark dimension and beats the shit out of S.H.I.E.L.D and steals his cane, and he's like, and S.H.I.E.L.D's like, wait, you know, if you want to go back to your world or whatever, you have to give me the cane. And then Flash is like, oh, well, actually, I'm not going to fall for that bullshit. And he actually steals his gloves and realizes that that was what was able to, you know, I guess figure out what's going on. So they basically, at the end of the issue, Jay and Barry separate the cane and S.H.I.E.L.D from each other, so that way that this shit doesn't happen again. I'm pretty sure is S.H.I.E.L.D in Earth 2 and then the cane's in Earth 1 with Barry? Or, okay.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, this issue is kind of...
Wait, no, it's opposite. It's opposite.
It's opposite? Okay.
S.H.I.E.L.D is jailed on Earth 1 because that's where he stole from.
Yeah.
Right.
Kane is with Jay.
And I think, like, this issue was fun. I thought it was pretty clever how they were explaining, like, you know, how Barry figures out, like, oh, I need to be stolen. I need to go into the dark dimension to defeat this guy. I thought that was clever. To be honest, I don't know if really Jay does a lot of stuff in this issue. It's more so
He
Garrick.
got trapped, like, immediately.
Yeah, he's sitting in like a chair, right? He gets this, like sit down, like invisible energy shot in his chair or whatever. I'm like, I don't know that.
I think
stupid science bullshit. But.
If I remember correctly, from like this issue and then the next two that we'll discuss in this episode of Crisis Cast, there's actually like a very small amount of teaming up between two Earths. Like it's mostly like in this one, Jay's only in there for a couple pages. I think in the next one, which we'll talk about shortly, like Jay and the other Earth 2 people don't show up until like 2/3 of the way through the book.
Yeah.
And like the last issue we're going to talk about today, I legitimately think Jay's in there for like less than 10 panels.
Yeah, so it's a little weird. I mean, you know, you want to see these guys team up a lot, but it seems like, and also seems like they're going back and forth between like helping each other Earths out. Like this issue, it's Earth, you know, 2 that's getting the help, and or Earth 1, I guess, and then vice versa. So, yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to see S.H.I.E.L.D a few times. I think we'll keep seeing him, maybe in some of the like crossovers following. But of course, the S.H.I.E.L.D is also known for his involvement with the '90s Starman series, which definitely acknowledges all of his past with the Flash. But it's definitely interesting to compare. And then the one other major thing I wanted to note is that at the end of this issue, Iris, she does get her ring, and then she jokes that the Flash should be Barry's best man. And Barry's like, we'll get to that when the wedding happens.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any more comments on 151?
I'm good.
All right, Dan, you want to take us to 170?
Will do. So this is next issue that we're going to talk about is Flash 170, and The cover's kind of interesting. There's just, shootouts, a armored car robbery, and Flash is just running through the middle of it and saying, God, things sure are quiet tonight. Might as well go to bed. And that's kind of the whole plot of the issue in a nutshell right there.
All right, I want to jump in on the cover real quick. So this cover, and it's the only one in this episode that we're reading, it has this checkerboard pattern at the top. I don't know if you guys noticed.
I did see that.
And so I decided to finally educate myself on what the hell that is. So DC ran this checkerboard pattern on all of their comics from February 1966 to August 1967. And the idea was to make DC's products stand out even more on the newsstands, since they would all have identical trade dress in a very notable way. And this was especially because some racks at newsstands or things like that, the way they would be arranged is that some of the comics would obscure some of the comics behind them and stuff like that. So that's why it's at the very top. And and it kind of worked because this is really the peak market share for DC all the way to today. So DC kind of reached their peak in 1967. And at this point, they were publishing 9 of the top 10 best-selling titles. Though Marvel, all the way in 1967, 5-6 years after Fantastic Four #1, Marvel is finally a force now with Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, and Thor all in the top 25. But Spider-Man, their highest, is ranked 14.
That's crazy. Going from Saga to Clone Saga, has Amazing Spider-Man ever fallen that low? Ever gone down that point since?
I have no idea. That will be something.
I assume it's consistently been a top 10 book.
Yeah. All right, Dan, you can get back to the plot.
No problem. So that first inside cover splash that we've mentioned a few times, it's Abracadabra basically constricting Barry in his Flash suit, and there's not too much interesting going on with it, I don't think, beyond that. But getting into the actual story itself, Barry and Iris are at a play because one of Iris's friends from college, I think, is one of the lead actresses. And so they're just, doing some stuff, and Barry gets introduced. The play is Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, and the part of Merlin is played by a guy named, I think, John Cardine. And at some point after meeting, after Barry's introduced to this John Cardine guy, he hears this extremely loud voice saying, "I'm happy to see you here, Flash, but don't worry, I won't tell the world you're Barry Allen, not yet." And so he starts freaking out, no one else. He eventually realizes no one else heard it. And so, of course, his first instinct is that had to be magic. So he starts following this actor who plays a wizard I think they say he did magic on stage. But so he follows him as the Flash and eventually goes to a place called Ceramics Castle. And he follows John Cardine in, but he disappears and the place is getting robbed anyway. So Flash takes care of all these gangster people, and then takes them to the precinct to get them, jailed and everything. And the owner of the store that was getting robbed wants to thank him and gives him this medallion. And Barry, being the guy he is just I can't take that. And just as a small aside here, this is where we start getting these weird text bubbles, narration panel kind of things, that just have hands sticking out of them, pointing to stuff. And I think this is the only issue that we're reading today that it's in, and it's kind of weird. Something I know we were talking about off air before we started this episode. But so old guy disappears right after Barry glances at this little medallion he gives him, and he goes in to talk to the judge, despite the fact that it's nighttime. There's just a judge here waiting to arrest these guys and hand out sentences. And so Judge asks him, like, what are you bringing these guys in for, Flash? And Flash is just like, I don't know. They seem like upstanding guys. I don't know why I brought them here. And they're just like, oh, thanks, Flash. Just for that, we won't press charges on you for the false arrest. And Barry just walks away, like, kind of confused. And this entire time, there's these, like, shaded people in fedoras and trench coats, like, following him. And the weird hand having balloons are like, who are these guys? And so Flash just walks right past a mugging, a car crash to take over an armored car. The cover of the story basically is one of the panels in here as well. And he just walks past all this crime. And eventually we figure out that the owner of Ceramics Castle is actually John Cardine, is actually Abracadabra, the Flash villain from the 64th century. And he explains how he escaped his prison where he was like guarded by some robot guy that would do anything for him except help him escape. So he has this robot give him materials to build something, which in my mind should set off red flags. But eventually Abracadabra builds the medallion we saw earlier in the issue that through technology makes it so that you can't see, hear, or talk about evil, which also applies to robots. So he just walks out of prison and then goes back in time to present day in the 60s and somehow has a ring that tells him who the Flash is. Don't know how he got that. And he literally just like sees that the play that
All right. We may have some technical difficulties.
It's a multiverse thing.
So Abracadabra, he sees the play in the newspaper, so he decides to become part of it.
You're getting frozen.
Just after midnight from Earth 2.
He got just the Omega sanction. He just is now back.
Yeah. Like they're there, and like they explain why they came over to Earth 1, and it's just Dr. Fate was in his tower looking at his crystal ball, and like some weird magic or whatever was happening. But in Earth 1, I don't know why magic goes across dimensions like that. I'm not one to question it. But so the three of them go over there solely because Dr. Midnight was chilling with Jay Garrick when Dr. Fate came by. And so they devise a plan to fix Barry's problem of not being able to see or hear evil. And basically they go and stop a museum robbery. Jay vibrates and or moves so quickly that he's invisible and guides Flash, kind of like that famous scene where the ghost or whatever helps someone make pottery, or maybe it's not a ghost. I don't remember. Yeah, Mike, you know movies better than I do.
Yeah, it's Ghost.
It is okay. It is a ghost. Yeah. So Jay's literally just like standing on top of Barry, like throwing his punches for him. And then Dr. Fate and Dr. Midnight are just invisible, but also help. And Abracadabra thinks that Barry has just gotten new powers because he's blind to evil now, because that's definitely how it works.
Well, it's kind of like Daredevil.
Yeah. Yeah, you go blind, so you suddenly have the ability to create darkness and manipulate wooden hands that someone else creates in the floor. It's a very natural evolution of powers. So Abracadabra eventually thinks, well, to counteract his new powers, I'll just let him see evil again. And that gets rid of it. And then you figure out that, well, that was their plan, of course. And they, Barry finally defeats Abracadabra. And instead of locking him up in today's jail or anything like that, he just says, all right, just going to hop on my cosmic treadmill real quick and take him back to the 64th century. Worked out very well the last time. And that's pretty much the end of the issue. I don't think there's anything important besides. Yep, the last couple issues are him getting back home, and Iris comes back at the same time, and she's like, "Well, why were you out so late?" And he said he was hanging out with some friends, and Iris says she'd love to meet them, and Barry's just like, "Oh, you will, once I figure out how to tell you that I am the Flash." So, just a little update into Barry's personal life, I guess, there.
Well, at this point, isn't he also married?
Yeah,
Yes, he's been married since the last issue we talked about on this episode.
Yeah, they got married in Flash 165. So between these issues.
Okay.
I thought the art in this issue, I mentioned this earlier, but I think because we jumped from 151 to 170.
Yeah, the art got a lot better in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's not a huge gap, but yeah, the art is significantly better. There's especially the scene in the ceramics place. Herman Infantino does these cool things with Barry running around with the speed lines, and he does like those whirlwinds with his hands. And then at the very end, there's the scene where he like runs out of his costume to punch Abracadabra in the face and then run back into his costume.
Yeah.
He's like worried about Abracadabra seeing his civilian identity, even though he already knows that Barry Allen is the Flash.
Yeah. So I have a question: Is he wearing his civilian clothes underneath there, or is he naked?
I think they're I think they're underneath. Just don't think too hard about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a little okay.
Speed Force, man. It's a great tailor.
I guess so.
So anyone have any final thoughts on 170?
Abracadabra
is a little weird, but
yeah, he's ridiculous.
Oh, the only thing I want to mention on this, outside of the synopsis I already gave, was I think Dr. Fate at some point in the last scene tried to like disable or counteract Abracadabra's magic, and he's just like, I don't know why it isn't working. And I don't know why Barry just doesn't mention that he's actually just a regular guy from the 64th century with really like high technology. Like, I feel like that would have been something that got mentioned beforehand, or, you know, at any point.
Yeah, it's pretty funny though. I mean, that's an often used trope where it's like it's not magic, it's just advanced science.
Mm-hmm.
So now we'll close things up. I'm going to handle Flash 173. And the big deal in this issue, because the rest of it I don't think is honestly that interesting, is we get to see Wally West for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the best Flash.
Yep. But at this point, he is Kid Flash in his yellow costume.
Yeah, the yellow costume and not the his first one, which is just a copy of Barry's.
Yeah, he just looked like Mini Flash. And so Joan and Jay Garrick, we open with them just hanging out in their house, obviously on Earth 2. And Joan thinks that Barry should reveal his identity to Iris because they're married and everything. Like, that's a pretty important thing. That's a big lie. So, and also she's like, I want to go to Earth 1. You've never taken me. And Jay's like, all right, let's go on a date to Earth 1 and hang out with Barry Allen. And so they meet Iris, and Wally West runs in. And Wally was with Barry. They were fighting the Domino Gang until a weird green explosion happened. And then as Jay and Wally search for Barry, the same explosion happens, and now Wally disappears. And they've been transported to the Andromeda Galaxy by the Golden Man, who is this stupid-looking alien with, like, orange skin and, like, a red gem-looking thing on his forehead.
He looks like Adam Warlock.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm not sure when Adam Warlock first appeared.
I'm pretty sure it's later, right? Like,
I think so.
I think it's the beginning of the 70s when he appears. I think it's definitely.
Well, so Fantastic Four, what, 67?
Yeah, technically him in Fantastic Four. Okay, yeah, so he's not officially Adam Warlock as we know him until 72. So I don't think this is really inspiration or vice versa or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But the Golden Man is an advanced life form on his planet.
He's
Everyone
a
else,
mutant.
Yeah, he's a yeah.
everyone else on the planet are cavemen. So it's actually kind of similar to Savage Dragon's origin, but he's an alien. But he's brought the Flashes. He tells them that he wants to basically play the great game. He wants to hunt them. So they start running. They start running away. He gives them a head start, and he starts tracking them down and trying to shoot them. And there's like these water jets. It's all pretty stupid.
You give the Flash a head start.
Why would you do that?
Just look back
So
and
that
listen.
when he runs around the planet, you won't have to move as far.
Yeah.
That's actually, yeah.
But it's actually all a ruse because his true goal is to capture their speed energy for some machine which will somehow evolve all of the other beings on his planet.
So that he can then rule them instead of ruling them now.
Yeah. But it all gets screwed up because Barry and Wally, they come across some quicksand, and Barry just sinks, and I guess he's presumed dead for most of the story. Wally escapes, but he needed 2 Flashes to get enough energy. So now he remembers, oh, I saw another Flash when I grabbed the second one. So he brings Jay, and he traps them and forces them to vibrate in space. So, like, I don't know why he didn't do this in the first place with Barry and Wally. Seems a lot easier than chasing them around the planet. But it turns out, of course, Barry is still alive, and he saves the day. In fact, the way he did this is instead of dying in the quicksand, he just, instead of trying to counteract it, he like basically played into it and drilled through the entire planet and came out the other side. And so Golden Man, as in a last-ditch effort, he does activate the machine, but it does the opposite of what he intended, and it regresses him in evolution and turns him into this caveman with no intelligence, which he's like a villain, but it's still kind of fucked up. I'm like, that's a pretty shitty conclusion. And then we get an offhand explanation, which like kind of doesn't even make sense to show up in this issue, where Jay explains the fact that he doesn't have a mask, but yet people don't know his secret identity because he vibrates his face in place. And that's occasionally used as the same explanation for Superman keeping his secret identity, besides the glasses. And the 3 of them, they somehow are able to understand this alien guy's technology and reverse his controls to teleport themselves back to Earth. And then the big thing at the end of this issue, which the beginning teased, was that Barry, he promises he's going to reveal his identity to Iris on their anniversary next month, which he actually does. I popped into the next issue. It's not that relevant to this podcast, but he tells Iris that he is the Flash, but she's like, okay, I already knew that because you talked in your sleep.
Oh my god. Are you serious?
Yes.
Wow. That is so amazing.
And
Jesus.
apparently, she specifically found out on their wedding night. So I don't know if that means that they had never slept in a bed together prior to their wedding.
Well, Vince, this is the Comics Code of Authority in the 60s. You know they weren't sleeping together until they were married.
So yeah, that's probably it. Or he just had some bad sleep apnea. He was up too late. I don't know. But that's hilarious. I love that.
I was gonna make a comment about that whole thing with Jay disguising himself, because that's some bullshit right there. That kind of reminds me of Fan Four Stick when Reed Richards like used his powers to like make himself into like a different face or whatever. But yeah, that's strange.
But like I thought this issue was really boring. Besides like the first 4 pages and the last 4 pages.
Does Iris know that Wally is Kid Flash?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think.
No, because I think there's like a moment in this issue where like he tells Joan to like go talk to Iris, and then then him and Jay talk on the balcony.
But also, if she knows that Barry is Flash, and she sees Kid Flash. Obviously, she's a reporter. She reports on them. Kid Flash is a like teenage shaped, and his hair comes out the top of his costume.
Yeah, I don't know how she can't put
so
two and
it's
two
like-
together.
And doesn't Kid Flash really only show up when Wally's visiting his Uncle Barry in Central City?
Yeah, like how's she gonna explain? How is Barry gonna explain who that kid is? Like he's just some random other kid.
And at the very end, we do get Wally does mention his hometown of Blue Valley.
Yep.
So I don't know how much we'll see Wally again until a long time from now. But it was nice to see him for this one issue.
Yeah, it's yeah, he goes back to Blue Valley to not have fun.
So
if you want to see what happens when he is in Blue Valley, you can go back and listen to the very first Flash by Mark Waid Volume 1 podcast that me and Ginger Dan and Nelson recorded.
He's freaking 3 plugs in one podcast.
He did say that was his superpower.
I'm like
I just want to know what his weakness is.
Pop and the master of the shameless plug.
So on that note, go check those videos out because this one is over. Thanks for watching. Next episode. Well, first of all, Jay continues to show up in some Flash issues occasionally, but he shows up kind of less following this chunk because he's showing up a lot in Justice League, which we'll get to. And a lot of his later appearances, they're even less connected to kind of the multiverse stuff. He kind of just shows up to do whatever. So we won't cover most of those. But our next episode, we will cover more team-ups, and it'll be a mixed bag where we'll have the Silver Age and Golden Age Green Lanterns hanging out, and then the Silver Age and Golden Age Atoms hanging out.
Ooh.
And
I'm excited for some Hal Jordan and Alan Scott.
And then following that, we'll get into tons and tons of Justice League crossovers. So thanks for watching this episode, and tune in next time. Adios.